In today's video, I'm going to talk about the monkeypox event that is currently unfolding. Some of you may be familiar with my work going back a couple of years when the coronavirus plandemic first began. I did a video back then called Event 201. There had been a planning event for a coronavirus pandemic held in New York City a couple of months before the actual coronavirus pandemic hit. And we've been living that nightmare ever since, I think you can agree. Well, wouldn't you know it, there's a new pandemic on the horizon that is spreading fast, and it's all over the place because of its fun name, monkeypox. Have you seen this? This was from a couple of days ago, and honestly, I didn't bother to go get a list of updated case counts, but I know they have risen. BNO Newsroom, updated list of monkeypox cases as of May 18th in the evening. Portugal, 14 confirmed, 6 suspected. UK, 9 confirmed. That has gone up to 20 as of today. Portugal and Spain both have more today as well. Spain at that time had 7 confirmed, up to 40 suspected. Canada, 13 suspected. USA, 1 confirmed. Massachusetts, and that guy apparently had been in Canada. And that's where they say he probably got it. And France now has 1 case. The Daily Mail put out this graphic today showing that there's confirmed cases in Australia, Belgium, Sweden, UK, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, Canada, and the US. Okay, so in today's video, I'm going to cover some stuff about this monkeypox virus. And I'm going to do a refresher on Event 201, because at the time when I covered this, I ended up doing about 5 videos because the story just grew and grew and grew. The interconnections between this, the funding, the players involved, and they all overlap. And we are seeing this exact same thing play out right now with regards to monkeypox. There's a whole bunch of interesting things that I found that I can't include in this video, but I'm going to do another one very soon. All right. So let's start here. From this story from the Daily Mail, there's a couple interesting things. The UK Health Services said anyone with unusual rashes or lesions on any part of their body, especially their genitalia, should contact the NHS or a sexual health service. Now, see, that's weird. It's really weird that they're tying this to sexual activity, as NPR confirms in this article from May 18th. What is even more bizarre is finding cases that appear to have acquired the infection via sexual contact, epidemiologist Mateo Prochaska tweeted. This is a novel route of transmission that will have implications for outbreak response and control. We are particularly urging men who are gay and bisexual to be aware of any unusual rashes or lesions, blah, blah, blah. We do have a level of concern that this is very different than what we typically think of from monkeypox, said a senior CDC official. Yeah, I suppose if you're having sex with someone, you have a very good chance of coming in contact with the lesions, but then it makes very little sense that they would just be warning gay and bisexual men about this. Totally no sense at all. Try to figure that out. Now, I don't really have a hypothesis as to why this is being combined the way it is, like monkeypox and gay men, unless it's to cover up for reactions to the COVID vaccine, which it could be, which it very well could be. I have some interesting information on that for my next video. But for now, let's continue on with the story about this monkeypox outbreak, okay? Monkeypox, by the way, usually causes rash, fever, chills, and then these spots. In fact, it can be misdiagnosed as chickenpox. But as they're telling us now, it has changed. And it's not the only time it's changed, which I'm going to get into right now. Here's an article from September 2018 that says emergence of monkeypox as the most important orthopox virus infection in humans. This explains about it often being misdiagnosed as chickenpox. It explains that there are 2 genetic clades of monkeypox virus. The West African clade demonstrates a case fatality rate of less than 1%, and no human-to-human transmission was ever documented. In comparison, the Congo Basin clade, also known as the Central African clade, shows a case fatality rate of up to 11% and documented human-to-human transmission. It says monkeypox has always been considered a rare, sporadic disease with limited capacity to spread between humans. The threat would increase if there would be a virulence increase both naturally or through genetic engineering, a virus spill into more widely distributed taxa, or an introduction in other continents. I am very fascinated with the point there that it could become more virulent through genetic manipulation, because we know what they get up to all the time, and they call it dual use research. It's actually sometimes known as gain of function research. It's not always that, though. So they call it dual use research, and it's been hotly debated by bioethicists for decades and decades, and yet nothing is ever done to stop it. And what they mean is, basically, it's not the technology, it's how you use it. That's what they mean. And they use the excuse that if they don't genetically engineer more virulent strains of all of these viruses, quote unquote, or poxes or whatever, that someone else will. So we need to do it first and then make a vaccine from it. And we can't help it if it's used for nasty purposes. That's not our fault. That's bad people's fault. And I sort of get it, but I also think a lot of these diseases wouldn't even be around if it weren't for the monkeying, pardon the pun, with the viruses in the first place. And that is going to become very, very apparent. Very, very apparent, especially with this monkeypox thing. So it might have a good outcome. Who knows? Now I want to take you to an article from 2003 in the US. Monkeypox virus. There was apparently an outbreak in that year. And it says a girl came to the clinic with a lesion on her finger. She had been bitten by a prairie dog. And bacterial cultures quickly ruled out tularemia and the plague, which is what they suspected it might be at first. Biopsies of lesions taken from the girl's mother showed a pox-like virus. Cultures from the mother's virus and from the prairie dog matched and suggested an ailment from the orthopox family, Reed said. Right then, we knew we had something interesting. We do lots and lots of virus cultures. This was very unusual. There's nothing really in the literature about prairie dogs having pox viruses. When the clinic contacted the state health department, the doctors were told of similar cases in the Milwaukee area and learned that the prairie dogs may have been housed with Gambian rats through an exotic pet dealer in suburban Chicago. That really raised the suspicion that this was an old world virus that had made its way into the United States, Reed said. And they go on about where else these prairie dogs and rats and exotic pets were. But do you notice this? In this new outbreak of monkeypox, there's things very unusual. Wow, how did it suddenly start spreading the way that it's spreading? And back then in 2003 in the United States, they said the same thing. Wow, this is very unusual. How could these prairie dogs have even gotten monkeypox? Here's a report from 1997 saying monkeypox changes its pattern of human infection. Again, this thing is always changing how it infects humans. Isn't it funny that they're also always doing dual-use research on these types of things? It just changes naturally, we're led to believe. I'm just going to read a little from this. Monkeypox disease closely resembles ordinary forms of smallpox. Okay, that's important. Remember that. The viruses causing the two diseases are related, and vaccination against smallpox also protects against monkeypox. The emergence of monkeypox does not mean that smallpox, which has been eradicated, they keep saying, is re-emerging. In the past, an outbreak of monkeypox would not go very far in the village or last long because it did not spread extensively after the first patients recovered. However, what concerns the WHO is that the present study indicates that monkeypox disease is changing its pattern of infection in humans. This outbreak has a much higher rate of person-to-person transmission than seen before and spread through many generations of transmission, thus maintaining the outbreak for more than a year. The ending of vaccination programs against smallpox in the late 1970s has probably led to an increase in susceptibility to monkeypox and could explain the larger size of the outbreak, the higher proportion of patients aged 15 and older, and spread through many generations of transmission. Or it could be that the vaccination programs primed the body for this sort of infection, or when they did the original research, they ended up mutating the smallpox virus into something that could infect humans. And here's another article from 2020 talking about how they didn't learn their lesson about manipulating viruses. Rapid pox virus engineering using CRISPR-Cas9 as a selection tool, from 2020. And they talk about cleaving different genes into the pox viruses, including monkeypox and chickenpox and all the other ones, all the poxes. When will this end? This is madness. This is the so-called health establishment creating monsters. And then they'll rush in with their NGOs to profit from the exotic diseases. There's a guy called Rick Bright. Do you remember him? He was actually the guy who wouldn't give out hydroxychloroquine. He worked at BARDA, which is a division of Health and Human Services, HHS. This guy, Rick Bright, testified raising awareness about a bill that was going through the House to fund more and more research into emerging disease threats that could be used for bioterrorism. This was in 2018. A guy in the audience stands up and says, why don't you guys, is it possible that we can use some of this funding or this funding model to help solve the problems and diseases that we're faced with in our communities already? Not emerging, not some distant possible bioterror threat that might happen if someone ever engineered something. But hepatitis, that's what he was concerned with, hepatitis. Here is a clip of Rick Bright's answer.
Time, I think, is critically important to understand the purpose of the creation of Project BioShield and PAPA, and to prepare our country for these bioterrorist threats, these threats to our American way of life that are determined to be significant threats by our Department of Homeland Security or intelligence community. We've been successful in addressing many of those threats through medical countermeasure preparedness because we've had that focus to discipline, to the strategy, and to the mission. And so, not saying that those other threats aren't as important in some cases, but I think it's critical that we do not expand the model for preparing for these significant threats to our Homeland Security. I think it's opportunities to take parts of the model and maybe replicate it in other areas. But I think BARDA and Project BioShield and PAPA should really focus on those threats. Remember, they're evolving, they're changing, they're spreading, and they're mutating, and they're being mutated faster in ways faster than we can even imagine right now. And so we want to stay disciplined to our strategy to protecting our country from these threats. It's important that we keep a focus. It's important that we keep the constant flow of funding for those threats and not dilute that effort.
And you see, by Rick Bright's answer, how uninterested they actually are in health. They don't care about diseases that already exist, possibly because they know they can't be cured. Whereas if they try to get money for diseases that don't even really exist yet, they never have to prove if they can cure them or not. They just make these things they call vaccines, and then they get governments to stockpile them. That's how they make their money. In fact, the guy who is the CEO of the company who has gotten the contract for the monkeypox vaccine in the EU, in Canada, and in the US, he's also on that panel. And here's what he says about the need for funding.
So as a CEO of a private company, I am questionable. I am answerable to my investors who are co-investing in this journey, to my customers, which includes the US government, but also patients and the public at large. And depending who I'm sitting in front of depends on who's more important. But in reality, it's who pays the bills. So for investors, they need to see a CEO add value, create value, grow the company, and to put it crudely, make them money. So I'm often faced with the question, why are you investing in biodefense when you could be investing in other cancer vaccines, which many people have a closer relationship to? And basically, it's hard to answer because without a proven marketplace, there are questions, why do you continue to invest in this space, albeit that we've been one of the most successful companies in this space. And to try and put that in the context, we have been awarded 2 large contracts by BARDA over the last decade. The first was actually, I believe, the first contract under BioShield, which was in 2007, which was $500 million to develop Imvamune, our safer smallpox vaccine, and produce and deliver 20 million doses. The market, the investment community loved that award. It was $500 million as a block award. I could explain the value. I could explain how the revenues would be coming through over the coming years. That contract was highly successful, as I've just said, brought a better product through to the marketplace. And last year, we were awarded another contract of a similar value, $500 million. But because BARDA is now funded annually, that was only split in between a base contract of $100 million and everything else was future options. The market hates it. My share price hardly moved. The investment community is asking, why have you gone from $1 billion contract to a $100 million contract? Options are seen as...
And that guy's stock, by the way, that company, Bavarian Nordic, its stock has gone up 28% today, May 19th. Incredible, says Bowtied Tengu on Twitter. So that's the big model. And with monkeypox, we're seeing a replay of what happened with the coronavirus. And we know that the largest companies in the world raked in the dough during coronavirus, as did, of course, pharma companies and those NGOs that have gathered around them like leeches, that actually work to create the conditions in which we'll need more and more vaccines from these pharma companies, in which their NGOs invest, or their personal vehicles invest, right? Like people like Bill Gates. Obviously, I'm talking about people like Bill Gates. So do you think he would want to pull off this same coup again? Him and all his buddies that were in on the first one? I do. And they are. First, we have this tweet here from Disclosed TV. Upcoming G7 health ministers' virus exercise is a leopard bites a human and transmits a dangerous smallpox virus. Oh, Polly, smallpox isn't monkeypox, you might say, but we already covered that. Smallpox is a version of monkeypox. Monkeypox is a version of smallpox. The viruses are related. We covered that. So that's interesting. And here from the World Economic Forum's annual meeting scheduled May 22nd to 26th, you can see here that one of their panels is going to be preparing for the next pandemic. And who's on that? William H. Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That's hilarious. William H. Gates, they're all of a sudden calling him. Is that so you can't do a handy search for his name using Control F? It's like, Bill Gates doesn't appear. Well, guess what, World Economic Forum? I just searched for Gates. Go ahead and try to get around that. Maybe Bill Gates will change his name. But no, because his legacy, that'd be a bad thing. Don't want to change your name, Bill Gates. All right, and then, so those are 2 so far upcoming planning for the next pandemic scenarios. Then we had this article out of the Express, and it said its headline is "New Pandemic Warning Issued After 250 Million Die of Monkeypox in Horror War Game Simulation." And in this article, they say that it was a simulation put on by the Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness and Response. Now, I looked at their documents that they put out for monkeypox. I did the word search for monkeypox through as many documents about them and by them that I could find, and I only found one incidence. They just mentioned monkeypox along with a whole bunch of other diseases like Ebola and hantavirus and all this. So I didn't find this scenario, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't look into who these cats are. This independent panel for pandemic preparedness and response. Why, wouldn't you know it, they were stood up by the World Health Organization, and they report to the World Health Organization's governing bodies. This was started in 2020, and they presented their report in May 2021. And what's their big findings, by the way? That we should all fund the WHO more and that we should hand over more sovereignty to the WHO and let them make decisions. Of course, that was their recommendation. So I'm not saying they're good, but they're not the ones, I don't think, that put on this monkeypox wargaming simulation, right? Let's just have another look, though, at the players involved in this independent panel for pandemic preparedness. Who have we got? Oh my gosh. Okay. Chatham House, Gavi, Global Fund, Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, UN Foundation, and World Bank. Some of the people involved: Seth Berkley, Chris Elias, Tim Evans, Jeremy Farrar, and George Gao. These are exact overlaps of the people involved in the Event 201 planning scenario. All right. Do you know what that is? I'm sure most of my audience does know what that is, but in case you don't, I'm going to go over it in a little bit as a reminder. Also in this independent panel for pandemic preparedness and response, we have Mark Dybul, who was teamed up with Anthony Fauci to set up PEPFAR, which is the President's Panel on HIV AIDS. They give millions and millions of dollars out to other countries to fight HIV AIDS infection. This was the baby of Anthony Fauci, and it figures in big time to the State Department funneling money to activities and people that maybe it shouldn't be. Mostly a lot in Ukraine. Soros and the embassy there. And what's interesting about that, of course, is that the embassy is the one that oversees the biolabs in Ukraine. You remember? Russia says there's biolabs in Ukraine creating bioweapons, and then the U.S. responds by saying, no, there's none. You're crazy. And then, Victoria Nuland testifies that, yes, of course, we have biolabs there, but they're just not making weapons. And then since then, everybody's had to admit it. Yes, there's biolabs there. And they're hiding behind this thing where it's not the technology, it's how you use it. The dual use research thing. Are they making extra virulent strains of virus to hurt people? Or are they doing it so innocently so that they can then create the cures for these more virulent viruses they just made? There's the debate. That's the level of the debate. Anyway, all right, so that's one nefarious character. The other person I have circled here is the Right Honorable Helen Clark. And I thought, I just read that name somewhere, didn't I? And sure enough, yes, if you recall this Davos annual meeting, the World Economic Forum, the Preparing for the Next Pandemic, Helen E. Clark, along with Bill Gates. I wonder why they don't say that she's from the Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness and Response. I don't know. Maybe they don't like to make it too obvious, because we did expose them completely with the Event 201 coronavirus pandemic planning exercise that they held right before a real coronavirus pandemic broke out. We exposed them completely, and maybe this time they don't want to make it so obvious. Well, sorry, but it's game over, and everybody knows now what to look for. And they found it. All of those other things, little warnings that they're planning a monkeypox or smallpox variant outbreak, right? But here's the big one. Strengthening global systems to prevent and respond to high-consequence biological threats, a 2021 tabletop exercise conducted by NTI, the Nuclear Threat Initiative, in partnership with the Munich Security Conference. And why is this such a big deal? Because if you look inside that publication, you're going to find that their scenario was a monkeypox pandemic. Boom. Boom, boom, boom. What are the chances of that? And looking further into this document, this is the page they have about the scenario. The attack would begin May 15th, 2022. And the whole thing would come to an end, I guess, December 2023. That's what they ran through in their scenario planning. So let's look. May 15th, a monkeypox outbreak in Britannia. Britannia? Where did this one start? Britain. I know it's not exactly the same. They're making up a fake country with Britannia, but this monkeypox outbreak began in the UK, Britain, right? What? Wait. What was the date of the first reported case of monkeypox 2022 in the UK? May 13th? Oh, well then obviously this one thing has nothing to do with the other. It's off by 2 days. It can't possibly be that they planned this out, strategized a timeline and the whole bit. No way. On the other hand, I have to say it is a little bit too coincidental, isn't it? It's a little bit too good. So there is a risk that they're leading us down a garden path here. But I'm covering the story as it develops. We will see. I mean, we can only go off the facts at hand, can't we? Let's return to the scenario timeline and see what's next. Then January 10th, 2023, there would be 83 countries affected, 70 million cases, 1.3 million deaths. They're going to find out that the monkeypox was engineered to be vaccine resistant. They have international supply chain challenges. May 10th, 2023, 480 million cases with 27 million deaths, and the revelation of the terror group that originated this outbreak. Infiltration of civilian biolab. This is the story. This is the story they're putting out as their fake scenario. Let's see how closely it all resembles the truth. And I can already tell you the pieces are in place for this. But I got to warn you, like with coronavirus, I think it's mostly bluffing. I don't think it's going to cause the deaths that they say, just like in their original Event 201 coronavirus planning exercise. Not nearly the number of cases or deaths happened that they projected in their terror show. This is a terror show. This is meant to terrorize people into getting vaccines, just like always, and making these same players rich. Oh, and of course, consolidating power in one world government run essentially by the WHO, the WHO, which is really the United Nations, who is now in a tight partnership with the World Economic Forum as well. Okay? Right, one more little close-up here on their scenario. By December 2023, there are to be 3.2 billion cases, 271 million deaths, and the global differences in national responses contribute significantly to variable outcomes in various countries. Right. Well, they're going to say, Canada did this and they had a lot of deaths, and like Spain did this and they didn't. So what we need is a consolidated global response. Everybody's got to follow the exact dictates of the WHO from now on, anytime there's any outbreak. We have no variety for, special circumstances in different countries. You all have to do the exact same thing. That's what they're going to say. And here I've circled one of the key issues that they identify to look at, which is this biosecurity and governance of dual-use bioscience research. Yeah. After the horse is already well out of the barn, they want to close the barn door. I don't even understand why they would schedule that in. Like, they should just be going straight for that. That's the only thing they should be debating. They don't need an outbreak to debate it. A lot of people already want to debate this. Why aren't they? You know why I think? Because they need this to go on so that they can have this scenario where, a maniac got his hands on viruses, genetically engineered them to be more deadly, and then now we have the pandemic, and now we have a lot of deaths, so now we need global government. Because if they went ahead and stopped this so-called dual-use research, gain-of-function research years ago, like they should have, They couldn't have brought the world to this point with their terror shows of coronavirus spectacle and now the monkey virus spectacle. And then therefore they couldn't have their world government. All right. Now who are some of the people that took part in this actual monkeypox virus pandemic scenario from the Nuclear Threat Initiative in 2021? Who are some of the people? Why we've got a total overlap with the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board and Event 201. We've also got some people from CEPI there, which got a ton of funding from COVID. Just a ton. And of course, these guys, George Gao, China's CDC, Jeremy Farrar, Wellcome Trust, Chris Elias, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So let's look at the Event 201, I want to just remind you of how it went. Right here, I said there's overlap with the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board and Event 201. Well, here's the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, which was an organization that said it was independent, but was actually put together by the WHO and the World Bank. Just like this one, the Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness and Response. Find out that it was established by the Director General of the WHO. For coronavirus, they had the GPMB, and for monkeypox and going forward, they have the so-called Independent Panel on Pandemic Preparedness. Unbelievable. Who funded the GPMB? Chatham House, Wellcome Trust, Johns Hopkins, World Bank, World Health Organization, Tim Evans, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Who funded these guys again? Chatham House, Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, Gavi, Global Fund, UN Foundation, World Bank. And there you see the people. Tim Evans, Jeremy Farrar, Chris Elias, Seth Berkley, George Gao, and lots more, of course. There's probably way more who overlap, but these are the ones I found and focused on when I did the Event 201 coverage, okay? Same people. Same people mostly. Now, several of these organizations wrote reports which then went into the final report of the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, and I just want to bring your attention to who those were: World Health Organization, World Bank, Wellcome Trust, University of Oxford, and Chatham House, the Red Cross, Johns Hopkins, of course, which hosted Event 201, and then this one. Check it out. Check out the title, From Never Again to the New Normal. That was from the Independent Oversight and Advisory Committee for the WHO. A member of that organization was Theresa Tam, Canada's Chief Public Health Officer. How is it that they named their report From Never Again to the New Normal, and now we're all calling this the new normal? They started calling coronavirus and COVID-19 response the new normal right off the bat, didn't they? Event 201 simulates an outbreak of novel zoonotic coronavirus. That's their scenario. And it's put on by Johns Hopkins, the World Economic Forum, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Of course, put on by the World Economic Forum, who said right away that this is the time for a great reset. The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. I hope it's becoming obvious that this pandemic, which they sat down and wargamed, which then actually came to be, enriched them immensely. It gave them tons of power. And with that money and power and influence, they have set up multiple more exact replica organizations. Like, why do they need this many? Why do they need the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board and the Independent Board for Pandemic Preparedness and the Independent Advisory Committee on Pandemics? And why do they need so many of these? Bill Gates has About 20 organizations, and have they actually done any good? Aren't we going right into a monkeypox pandemic now? And there's a bird flu one kind of bubbling under the surface here too, where they're threatening to destroy all the chickens. These people suck. If you're a normie, you just think these people are trying their best, but they keep failing. It's very tricky. That's not it at all. It's either that they are completely incompetent, which I don't believe, because they're getting what they want out of this, or they planned it and they are seriously evil human beings. I just got to see what else I've got here for you. You know, I just have so much. Here's some evidence of what they got in response. This was right off the bat, May 2020. They made countries pledge $8 billion for vaccines at a coronavirus pledging event hosted by the EU's Ursula von der Leyen, where she says, "Without you, Victor, my friend, none of this would have been possible." She's talking to Victor Zhao, who is president of the National Academy of Medicine in the United States and a board member on the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. Yeah, I'll say that without him, none of this could have happened. Look who else is on the board of the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. You recognize these faces? Chris Elias, Jeremy Farrar, and George Gao, who I showed you earlier. And guess who else? Anthony Fauci. Can you see it? Can you see it yet? Now, where did this $8 billion go? It went to Gavi, CEPI, the Global Fund, the Red Cross, and the WHO. All of these, minus the Red Cross, are Bill Gates' ventures. Why do I say the WHO is a Bill Gates venture? Because, as you can see here, as reported by the World Economic Forum, the second largest funder of the World Health Organization is a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Oh yes, and as for the Global Fund, one of those organizations that got all the money, Tedros Adhanom, head of the WHO, was chair of the Global Fund. Okay, what I am trying to get at here is that there is an overlapping group of people who constantly and consistently manufacture these situations and become very wealthy from them. I haven't even covered the whole gamut of this thing. There's an organization called CEPI, CEPI, Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. And that encompasses the governments of 4 countries, Bill and Melinda Gates, the Wellcome Trust, the World Economic Forum, and 6 of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies. I will put the graphic up on the screen here. All of those people also overlap with what I've just covered. At a certain point, it gets impossible to cover it succinctly because there's just so much evidence that it would take 4 or 5 hours to go over it with you, and it would be really boring. But I have been on the case of the global health mafia. I call it the global public health mafia. Since before the coronavirus pandemic, but mostly beginning from then forward. And I can tell you these are all the same people. They have a strategy. And a lot of it depends on just generating public fear. In other words, terrorism. The people who are out there pretending to make us safe from bioterrorism are actually the terrorists. They truly are. And the worst part of it all is that they are hoovering up your hard-earned dollars to do it. They don't even use their own money to do it. They extort countries and taxpayers to give their money to fund their organizations. That is the truth of this. And this monkeypox thing is just a reiteration of what they've done in the past. With anthrax, with coronavirus, and now with monkeypox. And I guarantee you, they are just going to keep doing it because it's a model that works. You see, they fund it in the front end under the guise of bioterrorism. They manufacture the extra viral viruses. They fund gain of function research. They make sure that viruses can leap from animals to humans. And maybe they don't even actually accomplish that task, but what they do is they use the media and extra governmental organizations to hype the story. Okay? And then they get funding from us, the taxpayers of the world, to develop vaccines. And then guess what happens a couple of years after they say they've done that? Then an outbreak happens. And that's when their stock prices go up. They're just going to keep doing this until we as a human community, a global human community, wake up and have the guts and the sense to call them out on it. This is the new war model. It's the new terrorism model. And people like Bill Gates and Jeremy Farrar and George Gao and Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx and countless others, Christian Drosten, Neil Ferguson, Boris Johnson, Justin Trudeau, they are the new terrorists. All right, I'm going to stop talking now. I've kept you long enough. Please support my work. I have a website, amazingpolly.net, where I have listed all of my old public health mafia videos on a tab called Mafia, Public Health Mafia, or Medical Mafia. Go there. You can search using Control F, and you can find out all about Ralph Barrick and his gain of function, Peter Daszak and the Eco Health Alliance, Anthony Fauci's gain of function research. You can find out the fact that Christine Grady, Anthony Fauci's wife, is head of bioethics at the National Institutes of Health. You can find out so much there. So go and look, please, because we have to stop these crazy Frankenstein psychopaths. We have to stop them. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Contribute to my work. Go visit my website. Review old material. Follow me on Twitter. I don't have a Twitter account. What are you talking about? Mrs. Smith? I don't know who that is. And until next time, everybody, peace out.